that person will no longer be with us to tell what really happened in the last circumstance. So very, very frightening concern. We're also very concerned about suicide contagion. And scientific studies have shown that in the states where assisted suicide is legal, the regular, if you will, regular suicide rate has increased exponentially, especially in Oregon. Because basically we're making the statement that this is okay. It just sort of condones suicide, which is a tragedy. It's always a tragedy. And I think that, again, so if we come back to what is truly merciful, what is truly compassionate, I think what we want to say is someone who comes to us saying, I want a prescription to kill myself, shouldn't be, or I want to kill myself, shouldn't be handed a prescription saying, okay, fine, here you go. They need love, they need comfort, they need companionship, they need palliative care, they need pain management, they need better health care probably, and better assistance in taking away those fears, and in being treated compassionately, and not dismissed and say, fine, go off and do this. And, and I think this is a really important thing to recognize is people can commit suicide. There isn't anything stopping anyone from doing this. What we're saying is, why involve the medical community in this? Why have the medical community condone and facilitate this by giving you a prescription to kill yourself? So, that's just touching the surface of the bill. It's just, so we need a groundswell of, voices against this bill, and we've worked really, really hard to provide people with the correct messaging, with the reasons of, I should say above and beyond, maybe below, the moral reasons why this is wrong, but it's something that we're very, very concerned about. I think the other obvious concern about this issue is the cost savings involved. And one of the stories that we frequently tell is about a woman named Barbara Wagner in the state of Oregon, where this is legal, who was diagnosed with cancer, applied for a very expensive cancer treatment through the state health care plan. She was covered in the state health care plan, and received a letter from the state health care plan saying, no, we can't afford to cover that, but this option is covered for you, so we will pay for your prescription. This is just a reality that you have to recognize is bound to happen if this were to become, kind of the rule of law. And there's horror stories in the Netherlands about, now it's euthanasia and killing children and depressed teenagers kind of opening this door. It's so often the church is kind of at the, got your finger in the dike saying, it's the same thing with abortion, The church is always there saying, don't open this door because you cannot close this door once it's open. And trying to uphold that principle and recognize the dreadful things, effect that this would have on us, and just the dreadful message that it brings about the quality of death, as Archbishop Lord likes to say. This isn't simply, but your death should be a beautiful death, and this is not a dignified way to die. So that's one issue that we're very, very concerned about. I know Jeanette asked me to touch on immigration, and I know that that's a third rail issue for a lot of people. And I think, recognizably, people have concerns about people breaking the law and coming into the country, but illegally and, taking our place, if you will. But I think the church, in its most basic approach, the church is a church of immigrants. We all came here, the church grew through all the immigrants that came to the country. And I think the church recognizes that the driving forces behind people coming into the country are so incredibly desperate. These are people who have such very, very difficult lives and lives of crime, terrible crime in their homelands. And I think we just see ourselves as a community that has to be embracing and loving of the traveler, of the migrant. So many stories in the Gospels of the Holy Family having to travel to another land. I think it's an issue so important to the Pope. So we do everything we can to try to accommodate immigrants in our country so that they can live a safe and healthy life and take care of their families. We supported legislation that would allow students who probably through no fault of their own were brought here legally by their parents, grew up in Maryland, to be able to access or pay the same tuition rate as any other student in Maryland. That was a bill that went through on referendum. A while ago, there was a crisis with the unaccompanied minor children coming into the country. And people, we don't want them here and so on. And we were opening our doors and saying, we'll welcome these children and take care of these children, try to reunite them with their families. And I think one of the most difficult issues we've all grappled with most recently is the Syrian refugees. I think that's, even people in my own office were, are you sure we really want to say that we should be welcoming refugees from Syria? But I think the church has been very helpful, again, in giving people information, and sort of taking the politics out of it, saying, let us at least give us a hearing about what the church does. The church is one of the largest sellers of refugees in the entire country. And the church is also in the countries where refugees are. We think of all the Catholic Relief Services does. And, you know, once we all, I think, learn about the vetting, the incredibly difficult vetting process that refugees have to go through to even be allowed to, it's like a 2-year process and all levels of scrutiny through every level of homeland security. I think people were able to sort of, you know, be reasonable and to say, we can't start saying, you can't come into this country because of your religion or because you come from a particular country. I think we need to, you know, be very careful and be reasonable about, we can't just, as a policy, say no to a whole group of people. And I included back there a statement that the bishops issued when this was all kind of heating up, just to sort of say, and again, I think that's where we show our face of mercy. That's where we show that, you know, the church's values rise above our political opinions, and that we really need to think these through from the perspective of the gospel. Other issues that we're working on, obviously, I think everybody in the state is very concerned about Baltimore City and everything that's happening in Baltimore City. I was just at a meeting this morning with there's a group of a lot of the Christian and religious leaders called the Ecumenical Leaders Group in Baltimore. They're meeting with the new police chief, Commissioner Davis from Baltimore City. And it was really, I mean, he's Catholic, by the way. Lovely man, but, you know, really eye-opening listening to him talk about what the police is trying to do to address the issues in the city and how broken the relationship is between law enforcement and so many, particularly the minority population in the city, and how they're really working to try to rebuild that. But I mean, they, you know, we've actually spent a fair amount of time over the summer since the unrest in West Baltimore, just various things coming up that brought us there. And I don't know how many of you have ever been to Sandtown, Winchester, or through that part of the city, but it just makes you weep. And mostly because you're just looking through street after street after street of abandoned buildings and a very, very harsh environment. And you just look down to the east, and it's all the downtown. I mean, you can look right straight down the streets to bustling, vibrant, well-to-do downtown Baltimore. And I mean, that those two worlds could be so close together. Just cries out for attention. So I think that there'll be a lot of issues before the legislature trying to address some of the challenges there, and I think we'll be very much a part of that. I know the Archbishop has, really put a lot of time and effort into trying to see what the church can do to be more integrated and more coordinated in the city. And I mean, again, the church has such a big footprint. I think there's a lot that we can do to be a difference and make a difference. With the school here, it's important to get, we have some past parents, and we worked together way back when, 20 years, when we first started working on trying to bring economic relief to families that choose to send their children to Catholic schools. And we've been working, we've succeeded over the years in getting textbook funding for kids in our schools. More recently, a program called the Aging Schools program that allows us to get grants from the state to help capital improvements, which is, we have so much deferred maintenance in all of our Catholic institutions. So that's another piece of funding that we've been able to secure. And then the big issue that we've worked on for a long time is the education tax credit. And I will go to my grave working on this until I see this get done. But it would be a tax credit to businesses that donate to scholarship organizations. So right now, if a business gives money for a scholarship organization, they get a charitable deduction. They'd be able to reduce their income. That's taxable. This is an actual tax credit. They get money back from the state off their taxes. So a real incentive to get businesses to donate. And we're really, again, with the unrest in Baltimore, really trying to drive home the fact that a Catholic school education, particularly in the inner city, is truly a path out of poverty. We've actually done polling on the issue. It's extremely popular around the state. Republicans, Democrats, I think in Prince George's County, 82% of people supported the proposal. But one of the messages that really does resonate is that message that this is a way to help families find a pathway out of poverty. But I mean, not that it would only, I think that the important thing to remember is while the tax credit money would likely focus particularly on the lowest income, it's going to free up scholarship funding for everybody. I mean, because we know, I certainly know from hard experience how difficult it was to send 4 kids to Catholic schools, and our middle class families are really struggling. And again, that is who we are as a Catholic communities. We want to keep our doors open to everyone and not simply become an elite private school system. So that's very near and dear to my heart. I started out working on education issues, and I think it's so important that we keep at that on behalf of our families. Lots of other issues, but I'm noticing the time, so I thought I'd never be able to talk for an hour and forget it. Paid sick leave is an issue we're working on, just a basic family issue. If you, most people, in better paying jobs have paid sick leave, but it's people, lower income workers who have to decide, am I going to stay home with my sick kid today, or am I going to stay home with my flu today, or miss a day's wage, and I think that's a very difficult choice to put before people. So this is a bill that would allow people to accrue paid sick leave for hours worked. I think it's 1 hour of sick leave for every 30 hours worked. It actually exempts businesses of 10 employees or less. I think the advocates have really tried to work with the business community not to make it an imposition on businesses, but to really balance out a fair way of working employees and employers, and working on that. So in closing, again, another Pope quote. I just want to say, I think that one of the real blessings in this work is seeing how much of a mediating role the church can play in the political world. We work with all kinds of coalitions, and all the liberal coalitions are always saying to us, you guys go talk to the Republicans because we have no relationship with them. And likewise, we're on the conservatives, like, you guys go talk to the Democrat, we meaning us, the church. But we are so, just to kind of tie up what I'm saying, so in the middle that we really can be a voice to try to bring sides together. We really work to do that. And that was a theme that the Pope really stressed during his talk to Congress. So I just want to finish with a quote where he was kind of exhorting them to try to cross this divide and to pull ourselves out of what is just a dreadfully divisive political world right now, and to try to bring people together. So he said, a delicate balance is required to combat violence perpetrated in the name of a religion, an ideology, or an economic system, while also safeguarding religious freedom, intellectual freedom, and individual freedoms. But there's another temptation which we must especially guard against, the simplistic reductionism which sees only good or evil, or, if you will, the righteous and sinners. The contemporary world, with its open wounds which affect so many of our brothers and sisters, demands that we confront every form of polarization which would divide it into these two camps. We know that in the attempt to be freed of the enemy without, we can be tempted to feed the enemy within. To imitate the hatred and violence of tyrants and murderers is the best way to take their place. That is something which you, as a people, reject. Our response must instead be one of hope and healing, of peace and justice. We are asked to summon the courage and the intelligence to resolve today's many geopolitical and economic crises. Even in the developed world, the effects of unjust structures and actions are all too apparent. Our efforts must aim at restoring hope, righting wrongs, maintaining commitments, and thus promoting the well-being of individuals and peoples. We must move forward together as one, in a renewed spirit of fraternity and solidarity, cooperating generously for the common good. Couldn't have said it better before. Thank you, Pope Francis. Did you want to take questions, or do you want me to go home?
Does anyone have any questions? Mary Ellen?
Is there any legislation pending about using re-abortion that they consider rejecting it out of women?
That actually was a bill we worked on for a long time that was passed by regulation. So it was right around here, wasn't it? That dreadful case with Gosnell. Didn't someone come across the border to Maryland?
Well, I know there were reading over the public order,
Yeah. Right, exactly. And that spurred a very strong push to try to regulate abortion clinics because the state itself admitted we have absolutely no jurisdiction over this. There's nothing that we can do. So what ended up happening is that the state did pass regulations governing abortion clinics. So they can now go in and shut them down. They can go in and inspect them. So, you know, kind of talk about a Pyrrhic victory. Yes, we now can inspect abortion clinics, but that was done through regulation. It was inspired by a bill that we had worked on. So, and that Nancy Paltal was our Respect for Life coordinator at the time, and she really worked really hard on that. Worked with the state to get as stringent as we could regulations in place. Pardon? Yes, yeah. Well, I think there is though. I think the State Department, they really wanted to see something passed because they wanted to go after some of these really dreadful cases.
Any other questions?
Regarding physician-assisted suicide, I think it was just as recently as last year, there were some heartwarming videos going around the internet of people, young adults mostly, who knew they had a terminal illness and were choosing to die with dignity by physician-assisted suicide. Are there any plans for your media department that would send the other voices, videos of the other voices, the elderly, those with disabilities, that would show that side of the story and how vulnerable they are? Because honestly, you get those videos in your newsfeed and they're very compelling. You watch these people talking about, I want to die with dignity, it's my choice, I don't want to burden my family, but we never hear the other side. I'm so glad you touched on that.
Yes, we don't actually have any videos in the work, but there are some out that we're promoting. I strongly encourage everybody not only to sign up for the Catholic Advocacy Network, but on the Q&A, please sign up for the coalition as well, because we're sent there. For instance, just today, the coalition sends a blog out, I think once a week, and then does tweets and does Facebook posts, a video of I want to say it's a vet who had this is Brittany Maynard, is the girl that you're talking about, who moved out to Oregon to do this. Her husband is now traveling the country. I guarantee you he testifies here this year. Traveling the country in support of this bill. And I mean, we're just always up against huge money and huge PR firms and so on. So this coalition has been very helpful in doing that. So one of the videos we just circulated today, I think, is of this young man who had the exact same diagnosis as Brittany Maynard, was told he had 4 months to live, and now, I think 3 or 4 years later, is still alive and still doing well and able to talk about all of the things that he would have missed had he ever made this choice. One of the, if I didn't touch on this, stress this enough, I mean, one of the main points about this is a 6-month diagnosis is so incredibly unreliable. Everybody in this room knows someone who outlived a 6-month diagnosis. So when you put that together with no screening for depression, anyone who's told they've got 6 months or less to live and might be facing difficulty is going to be depressed. But yes, and then one of the most compelling witnesses we had is O.J. Brigance came and testified last year, and got a lot of, every time the media talks about this issue, they still will play the video of O.J. Brigance. I don't know if you all know who O.J. Brigance is, a former Ravens player with ALS. He he'll be involved again some way this year, so he was kind of our poster child, if you will. We had another young woman from a graduate from Mount St. Mary's who testified at the hearing and just told a beautiful story of how her dad had died of ALS while she was diagnosed twice with cancer, and has been able, her parents were told you'll never make it through, and she's such a survivor, and she's still alive today and doing all kinds of wonderful things. So but yeah, we've got to counter that with the same kinds of stories.
Thank you.
Good point.
Anyone else?
That Common Core, was that part of the Catholic schools as well? My understanding is, and that's really going against America.
Yeah, that hasn't come up at the state level. It's more, we haven't dealt with it. Yeah, it's more kind of a school diocesan issue. We haven't dealt with the legislation itself.
But it should be addressed.
Anyone else? I don't know about all of you, but I am overwhelmed with admiration for what you do. Looking at all these issues with the face of love and mercy is incredible. And I just want to get on the internet and join you and follow you around.
Well, pray for us. I do ask for your prayers. It's one of the most important things. And I have to say, one of the greatest blessings of our staff is what incredible faith everybody in the office has. And, we just went on retreat together, and it's just a beautiful thing to see. They are so dedicated to the work, and that's just an amazing blessing to have a job where you share that kind of faith with people and that kind of love for what you do. It's not always easy, but that makes it really worth it. So I do ask for your prayers for sure.